So this passage, in this verse in particular, verse 13, says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me, is one that, it's often quoted and we, talk about a lot. And in fact, I see it all over the place. And one place I see it with like athletes. Do you see like athletes talk about, I can do all things who strengthens me? So if you're familiar with this guy, Evander Holyfield, okay, so he's a boxer. He was famous for having Philippians 4:13 on everything. So here you see it on his robe. Here's like two different boxing trunks. He has Philippians 4:13 like everywhere. He talks about Philippians 4:13, right? And what is Philippians 4:13? It says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Okay? But it's interesting because when you look at this verse, and when you look at the context of this verse, it actually doesn't talk about the things that they're talking about. So a lot of times it's very taken out of context and misquoted. So in Evander Holyfield's case, he says, like, when I go into the boxing ring, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can beat my opponent. I can win this match, right? And he quotes this verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, is there some truth in that? Is there some truth in him believing that he can do all things through Christ? I think there is. But when we look at this passage, and let's go back and look at the context of this passage. When we look at the context of verse 13, which you always need to do, right? And this is where we go off of the rails sometimes when we look at different verses. We take a verse out of the context and we make it mean whatever we think it applies in our life and whatever we think it should mean. But we always have to let the context determine the meaning. Okay, and that's the case here. What does Paul say in the context of verse 13? Verse 12 says, I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstances, I have learned the secret, so he's saying this is a secret, of being both filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. Then he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So what is the all things that Paul is talking about in verse 13 when he says, I can do all things? What is the all things? It's every financial situation. Did you realize that? Did you realize that verse 13 is talking about money? Verse 13, that we often quote and talk about this, is talking about money. It's talking about being content in every financial situation. He said, whether well-fed or whether hungry, whether I have an abundance or I have a lack, I've learned the secret of being content in any situation, any financial situation. Here's the secret. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This is Paul's big secret. This is the secret that God has taught him how to be content regardless of whatever financial situation he's in. He realizes this truth in verse 13. It's not my money that gives me strength to live each day. It's not my finances that's going to determine how I live. It's not my finances, like Eliza had mentioned in verse 4, that gives me joy. It's not my finances that protects me from being anxious. It's not my finances that's going to determine if I'm going to be joyful or not. It's not my finances that's going to determine whether I'm going to live or I'm going to die. Philippians 1:21 says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. It's not about what we have in our bank account. That's not going to determine our life. That's not going to determine our future. It's not going to determine whether we're flourishing or not. It's not going to determine whether we're thriving or not. It's not going to determine if we have peace that goes beyond understanding. It's not going to determine whether we're going to do well in this life or not. And that's hard for us to keep believing that truth. It's hard because in the U.S., that's the message. You need to make money. You need to make money so you can have financial independence. They talk about financial independence a lot. You need to be financially free, which means what? You need to have enough money in your savings, in your IRA, in all of these different things so you can retire and have no worries. Is that really true? Is that what we really believe? It's hard not to let that affect us. It's hard not to let that kind of determine our perspective and how we're living and how we're spending our time and what is going on in our brain. What are we focused on? What are we thinking about all the time? In verse 8, or In verse 8, where it talked about, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, whatever is excellent or praiseworthy, think about those things. But so often, it's concerns about money. It's concerns about our job. It's concerned about doing better. It's about getting better, about promotion, or doing better in our business, improving the bottom line, or investing in this, or doing that, or worrying about different things about money and all the concerns that we have, whether it's our mortgage or our debt or our rent or things that are going on in our lives. When we look at all of these things, it can speak really loudly to us. And it's hard not to let those things consume us and those things to take a place that God never intended. Paul says, I have learned a secret. And really, is it a secret? I was thinking about that when he says, I have a secret. That sounds like something like you never even thought of before, right? When he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, is that really a secret? Is that like some secret knowledge? And I was thinking about that. It's not really the content of what he's saying, it's the application. It's the application. He said, that is a secret. And the secret is, if you can really apply this, then you can really be content no matter what. That's the secret. The secret is when you start applying this truth, when you start applying verse 13 and saying that it's not my money, it's not food, it's not any of these things that keeps me alive or keeps me going or keeps me thriving, it's Jesus Christ. If you apply that, then you're going to learn the secret, which is, wow, I'm good. I'm good no matter what. I'm good whether things are going really well. I'm going good when things are going really bad. I can rejoice at all times, right? This is the way that Paul is really exhorting us to be able to do this. He's giving us the secret. This is how to do it. We have to realize that Jesus is the one who sustains us, not our money. Jesus is the one who holds our future in our hands, not our money. Jesus is the one who's going to determine how well we do in life and how we're going to thrive or not thrive. Not our money. It's interesting because I've noticed churches either talk nothing about money or talk about money all the time, right? I don't see a lot in between, right? It's either they never talk about money. In my previous church, that was us. We never talked about money. And really, we did that because the church has this reputation of being about money and trying to get your money, and that's all they're concerned about. And so we actually did the total opposite. We never talked about money, and for years and years and years and years, we never talked about money. It's funny, like I was just sharing with Janet this week, like the only time we talked about money was during the offering time. And you know what we said? If you're a visitor, please don't give. That was our only time we talked about money. Don't give, right? That was our only message. But along the way, I started realizing, because I was in charge of like the church's finances, along the way I started realizing this is not good. This is not good that we don't talk about money. Money is a big part of our life, right? And in fact, when you look at Jesus' ministry and you look at the things he talked about, do you know he talked about money more than heaven and hell? I'm not saying money is more important than heaven and hell, but I'm saying Jesus addressed money more than he mentions heaven or hell. It's important. Look at this passage in Matthew 19 where Jesus talks about money. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I say to you, it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Okay, so he's talking about money here. He's talking about how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? It's easier for a camel to go through. You know how small an eye of the needle is, right? Especially as I'm getting older, I can't even see it, right? I can't even see to put the thread there, right? That's how small it is, the eye of a camel to go through that little opening. It's easier for a camel to go through that than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Look at the disciples' reaction. When the disciples heard this, they were very astonished and said, "Then who can be saved?" And looking at them, Jesus said to them, "With people, this is impossible, But with God, all things are possible. Okay, so again, this might be another verse that you've heard before, right? With people it's impossible, with God all things are possible. What's the context of this verse? It's also talking about money, right? It's also talking about money. It's talking about money in our relationship with the kingdom and with our relationship with God. This is about money. And what does he say? It's hard when you have money to enter in the kingdom of God. Why? Why does being rich make it difficult for you to enter into the kingdom of heaven? It goes back to what Paul is talking about in chapter 4. Because when you have a lot, it's easy to depend on it. It can bail you out. It can solve problems. And isn't that what people say? Money can solve all your problems. Money can solve these difficulties that are going on. But we realize that's not true. You realize that because you see people who have a lot of money but have no peace. You see people who have a great amount of wealth but have no relationship with God, no peace, no fulfillment. They're not thriving. They're just continuing to strive. And they're continuing to try to make it through. I think them more than anyone will really tell you, hey, you think this is going to solve it? It doesn't. Let me tell you, because I have it. And it doesn't. I think they're ones that could have the strongest testimony, right? To realize that's not the answer. That's not the answer. You know, it's interesting. I saw this one kind of like research study they did on lottery winners. Okay, so, you know, like the Powerball and those things that they've won like millions and millions, like $100 million, $150 million. And we kind of say that jokingly sometimes like, well, if I would just win the lottery, then I would ... right? We kind of joke and talk about like that, like the lottery, right? But it's interesting what the study showed was that the vast majority of lottery winners said, I was more happy before I won the lottery. And that might sound surprising, like, you were more happy than you won $150 million? And they go on to say, because my life started turning upside down. It all started revolving around money. Everything was about money. All my conversations with everybody were about money. They all wanted to talk about my lottery winnings. They all wanted a piece of my lottery winnings. They all wanted me to help them. I had friends that I never talked to in like 25 years call me up and try to get me to give them some money. And then when I say no, they're so angry. They're so upset with me. They're so upset that I don't give it all away to all my family, that I don't buy them all houses and cars, and they lost all of their friends, and all of their relationships are fractured because of money. And the majority made this comment, says, I wish I'd never won that. I was more happy before I had the lottery than after. It's telling, isn't it? The ones that have what we wish we had, their testimony is the strongest, saying, this is not it. This is not it. Let me tell you, because I have it. This is not it. If you're going to place your hope in that, if you're going to place your desire in that, if you're going to put your life on hold for that, you're putting it for something that's empty. Paul says, I found the secret of being content no matter what my financial situation. I can do all things in all those circumstances because of Christ who strengthens me, not because of any material thing that I have. If we can learn this secret, and the secret is not the knowledge because we kind of know the knowledge, it's applying it. Can we really apply that? Can we really live that? Can we really say that every day? Can we say that every time we get our paycheck? Can we say that when we write our offering check? Can we do that when we put our Venmo in there? Can we say those type of things as a declaration to the Lord that money doesn't determine my life? Money doesn't determine my future. Only God does. Only God does.